unexpectedly exposed. A millionaire mocked her dress at the charity ball. She donated $5 million. Emily stood in front of her mirror, critically assessing her reflection. The thrifted gown, with its faded but elegant lines, felt like armor, a testament to her years of scrimping and saving. She adjusted the neckline, breathing in deep, steadying breaths against the whirlpool of nerves threatening to overwhelm her. Tonight's charity ball was her opportunity to step outside her world of scrubs and hospital corridors, and yet, the weight of responsibility clung to her like a shadow. Would being in this lavish venue mean abandoning her roots? Abandoning her family? The thought of her mother's frail smile flashed before her eyes, reminding her of all that she carried within her. As she walked through the grand entrance, the contrast of her surroundings hit her like a splash of cold water. Chandeliers glimmered from above, casting a golden hue over polished marble and exquisite floral arrangements, making her gown feel even more inadequate. The laughter of affluent guests echoed like distant thunder, each chuckle a reminder of the division she thought she had set aside. Doubt seeped in, twisting her stomach. She couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong among such grandeur. Her heart sank when she spotted Ted, his smug smirk drawing attention. "Look at this charity case," he sneered, loud enough for several heads to turn. The word struck like a low blow, and the laughter that followed stung. Heat flushed her cheeks, and for a moment, she entertained the idea of disappearing back to the mundane reality of her life. But then a flash of her grandmother's spirit confronted her, fierce and unwavering. Emily felt the anger rise, mingling with her pain, churning into a determination she didn't know she possessed. She couldn't let his mockery define her. She had carved her life out of resilience, supporting her family, and giving everything to her patients. What did she have to fear from a world that seemed so out of reach? As she inhaled, her mind raced through memories of the countless times she stood up for her patients, champions of dignity amid the chaos. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With a sudden surge, Emily made her way to the stage, every step echoing the resolve in her heart. The applause came as a wave, an overwhelming sound yet thrilling. Standing in front of the crowd felt like fighting against the tide, but she clung to her voice. "I want to donate $5 million, she declared, the words ringing out amidst gasps and silence. The aristocrats' faces turned from surprise to something deeper, disbelief. Across the suddenly tense hall, the laughter around Ted faded, leaving a raw tension in the air. No one anticipated this moment. Emily had uprooted the very fabric of their pretentious existence. The weight of her generosity sat heavy in the room, silently demanding self-reflection. How could she be both exposed and dignified? Her worth clashing with perceptions of affluence. What would happen next? As eyes locked on her, confusion morphed into anticipation, and the tumult of class and aspiration simmered on the surface. Would Ted, the epitome of arrogance, confront his beliefs, or shrink back into the comfort of his privilege? The air between them crackled, laden with the promise of transformation or the sting of resistance, leaving the audience in agonizing uncertainty, yearning for something more profound, something yet unresolved. Emily's declaration reverberated through the air like a thunderclap, interrupting the elegant facade that enveloped the room. The aristocrats' faces had morphed from shock to contemplation, their laughter replaced by hesitation. The eyes on her were a mixed tapestry of admiration, envy, and disdain. In that moment, she felt an odd mixture of vulnerability and empowerment. Had she become the center of their universe, just as they had always claimed to be? The silence enveloped her like a thick fog, her heart racing against the stillness. She wished she could capture this fusion of emotion, this collision of worlds. Yet, a darker part of her questioned the vulnerability that came with such exposure. Would they remember her for this moment? Or would she fade back into obscurity as just another figure in a crowded room? Emily's grip tightened around the microphone. She could almost feel the pulsating energy of the crowd. "This isn't just about money," she continued, her voice gaining strength. It's about the lives we can change, the voices that can be heard. We all have a choice, granting help or turning away. I choose to help. The words flowed from her, powered by a mix of passion and the relentless drive to prove herself. With every heartfelt phrase, she could sense Ted's discomfort increasing. His grin faltered, replaced by a tightening throat, as though the weight of her challenge was suffocating him. Around them, murmurs started to break out, speculations and judgments igniting a fire that hadn't been kindled before. The laughter had been silenced, but discussions buzzed in the air about the local nurse who dared bring such an audacious statement to the forefront. In the days following the ball, news of her $5 million donation cascaded through social media and print, overshadowed by snide remarks and half-hearted praises. While some spoke of her bravery, others dismissed it, citing her thrifted dress as proof she was unfit to mingle with the elite. Emily faced the wave of commentary with resolve. She scrutinized the way her actions had been twisted, yet deep within her stirred an unyielding intent to not merely be defined by others' perceptions. That determination propelled her to continue engaging with her community. She attended meetings with local charities and community leaders, discovering talents and networking that she never knew she had. She was able to delve into the intricacies of fundraising, becoming an advocate for patients who had been sidelined. Suddenly, she wasn't just a nurse in scrubs. She had evolved into an unrelenting force for change. Each event she organized became a testament to her belief that everyone had the right to hope, to heal, and to thrive. Through this journey, Emily found herself not just fighting for others, but rediscovering her own purpose. She started to sketch pathways to develop a foundation focused on healthcare accessibility, channeling her frustration into actionable plans. Each small meeting she led, each individual she inspired, solidified the grit that resided within her, a stark contrast to the self-doubt that had once plagued her. But with her growing influence came shadows of doubt about those she left behind, the friends who shared her old life, the family struggles that still pulled at her heartstrings. Were her aspirations truly noble, or were they only a juxtaposition aimed at transforming her identity? As she trained herself to bring importance to her community, she felt the pernicious thread of isolation beginning to weave itself into the fabric of her achievements. The stage was set for confrontation. The deeper she delved into her mission, the more she had to face those who believed she had abandoned her roots. Would she reconcile the competing parts of her identity, or would her new life push away the very foundation that had long supported her? The echo of Ted's scoffing remarks and the tension of the ballroom hung in her mind. The next confrontation loomed large, a moment when the past would face the present, and the decisions would reshape her future. Emily took a breath, preparing for what would come next, knowing she had transformed immensely, yet still too combustible to handle the flames of resistance looming ahead. Emily found herself pacing anxiously in her modest apartment, the walls echoing the uncertainties she faced. The initial thrill of her declaration had quickly morphed into a burden heavy with expectation. She replayed the ball in her mind, a cinematic loop haunting her, Ted's contemptuous laughter, the palpable tension, and the moment she seized the microphone like a lifeline. But the applause she had craved had morphed into whispers, and she could feel the weight of judgment pressing on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, a maddening blend of support and derision. It propelled her into a contemplative spiral, igniting the internal debate that raged within. Empowerment clashed with doubt, success flared against isolation. She glanced at the worn notebook on her coffee table, where bullet points of goals were scribbled alongside dreams of her foundation: healthcare accessibility for all. The phrase tethered her aspirations to reality, yet the haunting question remained. Was she truly prepared for the attention this mission demanded? Would her past friendships endure the test of ambition? Each meeting at the community center felt heavier than the last. The chairs around the table, once vibrant, felt like a reminder of the sweet simplicity she was drifting away from. Today would be different. Today there was a panel discussion on healthcare led by a well-known expert, offering a chance to elevate her new voice. She clenched her fists, channeling the desire to prove herself, to show not just her medical knowledge, but the emotional conviction behind her newfound path. The panel's setting was sleek, modern, a sharp contrast to the dimly lit charities she had navigated before. As she walked into the room, she noticed familiar faces from her old life. Friends, some cheering and others scrutinizing her, became living reminders of the tightrope she was walking. Would they see her as a traitor to her roots or an agent of change? Emily's pulse quickened. She settled into her seat, attentively observing the expert's delivery. His confident stance elicited admiration, but it also ignited an internal challenge. She wanted to speak, to disrupt, to insert a piece of her truth into this polished conversation. Her hand shot up during the Q&A, and the panelists recognized her with an encouraging smile. The eyes of her old friends bore into her as she stood to articulate her thoughts. "Thank you for that insightful overview," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos inside. "However, I'd like to address the barriers many face in accessing healthcare. Real change doesn't just require policies. It demands a societal shift in understanding and compassion." As the words flowed, she felt a rush of clarity. This was what she had come to do: merge her nursing expertise with advocacy. Before she could finish, a dissenting voice emerged, familiar and stinging. "And who are you to lecture us about change? You in your second-hand dress? A gimmick for attention?" Ted sat across from her, a smirk curling his lips, leaning back with a dismissive air. The crowd shifted, the energy palpable, as whispers rippled through the room. She faltered for a split second, but the resolve clawed its way back. "I'm someone who knows the system from the inside. I understand desperation. If my presence here jars your perception, then perhaps that's precisely the point." Her voice grew stronger, stirring a mix of incredulity and newfound camaraderie. The words didn't just come from her mouth. They erupted from her core, a defiance that bridged her old self with the emerging leader. There was no turning back now. She had to confront not just Ted, but the expectations that loomed over her. Leaving the event, Emily felt a shift within her, a sense of purpose solidifying against the backdrop of ridicule. Yet, beneath this facade of triumph lay the creeping fear of what might follow. She had stepped onto a precipice of ambition, but how many would she lose in the fall? The next confrontation awaited in the form of her best friend Jess, whose disappointment was palpable as they met for coffee. "You've changed, Em. You can't just ignore where you came from." Jess's voice trembled, and suddenly, the depth of her choices weighed heavily once more. Emily's heart raced. This couldn't be how it ended. It was time to face both her past and the cost of her future. Would she risk everything to hold on to her friendships, or would she sacrifice them for her ambition? The stakes had irrevocably risen, and the moment of truth was fast approaching. Emily stared into her coffee cup, the dark liquid swirling like the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Jess's words clung to her, echoing like a warning bell. They had always understood each other, navigating life's challenges side by side. But now, with ambition's bright light casting shadows on their friendship, Emily felt an undeniable rift forming. "Jess, I'm not ignoring my roots. I'm trying to elevate them," Emily shot back, her voice fierce yet strained. She needed Jess to understand, to see that this was more than a personal crusade. It was about conditions that had long plagued their community. Jess's eyes searched Emily's, filled with confusion mingled with hurt. "But at what cost? You're leaving us behind. You think that if you play with the wealthy and powerful you can change things? They won't accept you. They'll use you, discard you when you're no longer useful." Emily flinched, her heart racing. Was she really that naive? The thoughts churned in her mind as she tried to focus on their conversation, but images of the panel discussion flooded her thoughts. Ted's face loomed large, mocking. His laughter rang out, drowning Jess's voice in a sea of doubt. "What should I do then, Jess?" Emily challenged, frustration bubbling over. "Stay in my lane, fix minor issues while watching people suffer? I'm trying to go big. I want to bring change on a scale we've only talked about." "You sound just like them." "It hurts to hear you talk like this," Jess replied, her voice cracking. The sadness in her tone struck Emily, a sharp contrast to the fire of determination fueling her newfound ambition. Moments passed as tension thickened between them. Emily wanted to explain, to persuade Jess of the importance of her vision, but the words froze on her lips. Instead, she opted for silence, allowing the weight of her choices to settle. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the cafe window, Emily's resolve solidified further. She realized it wasn't just about the confrontation with Jess. It was about examining her motivations and navigating the line between ambition and authenticity. After the coffee chat, she immersed herself in research, poring over healthcare statistics, policy briefs, and community feedback. The more she learned, the clearer her mission became. She crafted a presentation aimed not just at the elite circles she had entered, but families seeking answers, victims of the current system craving understanding and compassion. Emily recognized that her voice held power. The hours spent alone infused her with a sense of responsibility, compelling her to be the advocate they needed. Days passed and Emily found herself on a new path, orchestrating meetings with local leaders and health advocates, striving to foster dialogue within the community. She sent out invitations, scheduled discussions centered on real-life stories, reinforcing her belief that empathy was the backbone of genuine change. But as she prepared her first public talk outside the safety of the panel engagements, she spotted a familiar face in the audience, Ted. He sat there with a condescending grin, and the realization shattered her composure. Was he there to undermine her yet again? Emily's heart raced as she stood at the podium, her mind racing through her notes. The intimacy she had hoped for faded under his gaze. Rising tension morphed into fear, but anger ignited her spirit. She needed to confront the shame he brought to her, not just for herself, but for everyone who had felt small in front of the powerful. She took a deep breath and let her voice ring clear. While some may dismiss those in humble attire, it's the stories they carry that matter more than the clothes on their backs. The audience murmured, but her eyes remained locked on Ted. In that moment she wasn't just presenting a talk. She was settling scores. Yet, would this lead to an explosive confrontation, or would it solidify her resolve? The stakes continued to rise, and as her presentation unfolded, Emily sensed she was edging toward a revelation of her own strength. But how far would she go to protect her newfound voice against the naysayers lurking in the shadows? Would her next steps be propelled by the momentum she had gained, or would she falter under pressure? The moment of truth loomed ahead, nearly within her grasp. Emily gathered her thoughts, a whirlwind of emotions swirling together in a tempestuous dance of determination and anxiety. She felt the audience's anticipation humming like a live wire beneath her feet, and taking a moment to glance at Ted only fueled her inner fire. The glimmering lights of the auditorium faded away as her mind sharpened into focus. This moment wasn't just about her, but about everyone whose story had been overlooked. With each sentence she spoke, Emily peeled back layers of her own hesitance, revealing a raw vulnerability that organically transformed into strength. Our experiences shape us into advocates for change, she continued, the words flowing more freely now as she channeled her frustrations into a compelling narrative. She noticed heads nodding, eyes widening with recognition, as she recounted the stories of families struggling within the healthcare system. Each anecdote felt like a shared heartbeat, resonating with her audience. She was no longer just a participant in the game. She was becoming a leader, crafting a bridge to connect those in desperate need with the solutions they sought. As she poured her heart into the last part of her talk, she could see Jess's face in her mind, a reminder of the friendship and trust that felt tenuous at best. Would Jess understand that this was not a betrayal but an elevation? Emily clenched her jaw, igniting a flicker of resolve. To climb higher was to widen the path for those left behind. Change doesn't come from sitting back and watching, she proclaimed, projecting confidence into the room. It demands a fight, but it's also about authenticity, taking our roots with us into the boardrooms that often overlook our struggles. We have to be the ones to educate, to bridge the gap between privilege and perseverance. The applause erupted as she concluded, the sound reverberating through her core. Yet, even as she basked in the validation, the familiar sharpness of Ted's stare sent a chill through her. He wouldn't let this moment go unchallenged. As she stepped away from the podium, adrenaline coursed through her veins, and her pulse thrummed with the possibility of confrontation. Ted approached, his smirk returning, confident as ever. You gave a nice speech, Emily, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But do you really think the wealthy will care about your grassroots efforts? They operate on a different level, you know. Emily felt the heat rise within her, a primal instinct surging to the surface. Why do you assume that my voice in those rooms will be anything less than a force of change? She shot back, her composure teetering on the edge of bursting. Pretending that power dynamics won't shift if we remain complacent is the true naivety. Ted paused, studying her for a flicker of insecurity, But when he didn't find any, his grin faded only slightly. Your passion is admirable. But I wonder if you'll still feel that way when your ideals clash with reality. Every instinct in her screamed to walk away from his derisive tone, but something deeper urged her to remain grounded. This wasn't just about defending her choices. It was about redefining her path. As she turned to leave, a thought struck her with the force of a tempest. What if Ted and the elite held back not just knowledge but opportunities too? What if she could expose their lack of genuine commitment to the causes they claimed to champion? This revelation resonated deep within her, stirring a dormant ambition that had been held back by fear. Fueled by a new mission, Emily was determined to dig deeper, to learn how the wealth she dared to infiltrate was often wrapped in empty promises. This knowledge could empower her and those she represented. But before she could act on her resolve, she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket, a reminder of another looming confrontation. Jess had reached out, her message a mix of inquiry and concern. Would this be the moment to mend their fractured bond? Or would it push them further apart? As uncertainty loomed, Emily found herself at yet another crossroads. She had ignited a fire within, but could she prevent the flames of ambition from consuming her relationships? What would her next move be now that she had tasted the exhilarating rush of standing her ground? The moment of reckoning was compelling. With her next decision weighing heavily on her shoulders, Emily took a deep breath, bracing herself for the potentially explosive dynamics that lay ahead. Emily's heart raced as she stared at her phone, Jess's message glaring at her like an unturned page of a long-neglected book. Are we still on for drinks? I'd love to hear about the speech. You're in the spotlight now. Every part of Emily wanted to protect the newfound momentum she had built. Yet a flicker of guilt sparked within her. Jess had always been there, her grounding force through the heavy fog of doubt. But was this the moment to reveal the full scope of her ambitions, or would it serve only to draw them further apart? Deciding she needed clarity, Emily took a step back, inhaling deeply to anchor herself. Trust needed to be forged anew. It would take more than good intentions to bridge the chasm created by her elevation amid uncertainty. The specter of Ted's condescension still haunted her, yet his words twirled in her mind like smoke, unpredictable and dangerous. She tapped out a response, weighing her words carefully. I'm in the thick of it all right now, but I'd love to catch up soon. Let's set a date? The reply came almost instantly, a swift burst of enthusiasm. Jess had little way of knowing the storms brewing just beneath the surface of Emily's carefully curated exterior. As her thumb hovered above the screen to send it, Emily felt the looming urgency to act. To bury herself deeper into her mission required that she not only face Jess, but invite her on this unpredictable journey. Arriving early for drinks, the familiar bar buzz filled her with a nostalgic comfort, but anticipation was tinged with something sharper. Time stood still. Her mind replayed Ted's skeptical smirk. She needed to prove him wrong, not just to him but to herself. She was capable, and this path was hers to navigate. When Jess arrived, her face broke into a wide smile, but Emily noticed the quick flicker of concern in her friend's eyes. It wasn't just the speech that had drawn Jess. It was the sudden shift in Emily that sparked questions. I saw the clip online. You were amazing, Jess said, her voice inflected with pride. But deep down, Emily could sense the unspoken worries layered beneath the excitement. Thanks. It's just, there's a lot of ground ahead, Emily replied, her tone betraying the swirling anxiety she tried to suppress. What do you mean? Jess leaned forward, genuine curiosity etched into her expression. Emily hesitated, teetering on the edge of revealing her inner ambitions. I think there are deeper issues in the system we need to address. Not just grassroots efforts but something more substantial. I've realized the wealthy can stifle our voices, and I want to expose that. Jess raised an eyebrow, a mixture of support and fear reflecting in her eyes. But Emily, that's a massive undertaking. You're taking on a lot. Well, if not me, then who? The defiance in her voice surprised even her. But it validated the truth of her intentions. Their conversation was punctuated by a weighty pause. Emily's courage felt like a tightrope walk, balancing ambition against the risk of fracture. Rather than pull away, Jess leaned in. I want to help. But you have to also consider how this might affect your relationship with others, including Ted. It was an astonishing moment of vulnerability, A glimpse into the complexities of balancing professional growth with personal ties. Maybe I can help you navigate that space, Jess suggested, her tone shifting to one of practical wisdom. You might not be able to change everything overnight, but you can start small. The inkling of a plan sparked in Emily's mind, where her ambitions, dreams, and Jess's offer of partnership intertwined into something potent. I think I can expose the lack of accountability by hosting a series of focused discussions, she said, her pulse quickening as she formulated a strategy. Start by bringing together those affected by the system. Maybe they can tell their stories. Jess's expression morphed from concern to excitement, and as they tossed ideas back and forth, Emily felt the foundations of her new ambition solidify into something tangible. It was as if each word exchanged sparked a fire that wasn't just hers alone. But then, as the evening wore on and their laughter rose above the din of the bar, Emily's phone buzzed again. A notification from a news app showcased the Foundation's recent donation announcements, featuring Ted prominently and his perceived commitment to charitable causes. In that moment, a sense of foreboding settled within her gut. Would her escalated mission put her in direct conflict not only with his ideology but also with his ambition? The resolve to confront power, and the intricate relationships it entangled, tightened around her like a vice. She had stepped into a pool of complexity, and now she had to face down the twin giants of ambition and loyalty. Tonight's revelations were far from over. Would Emily's light draw the attention of darkness lurking nearby? What would it take to navigate both the obstacles in her path and the fractures in her relationships? This was merely the beginning of her unraveling journey. Each decision carried immense weight. Confrontation simmered just beneath the surface, and Emily stood at the edge, ready to dive into unknown depths. Emily stared at her phone, the screen illuminated with Ted's announcement, a headline that felt like a mocking taunt. The hype surrounding his contributions rippled through the media, framing him as a benevolent figure eager to make a difference. But Emily knew better. Behind that crafted image lay a manipulative power game, one she was now determined to disrupt. Are you okay? Jess's voice broke through her fog of thoughts, the question hovering in the air with concern. Just processing, Emily replied, shaking her head as if trying to clear away the oppressive weight of expectation and ambition. You should really consider how to approach this, Jess said, settling back in her chair. Treading carefully isn't a bad idea. Ted's got influence, Emily. The thought sent a shiver down Emily's spine. His influence was not just monetary. It was cultural, a force that shaped opinions and, more distressingly, silenced dissenters. I can't let fear dictate my actions, she murmured, almost trying to convince herself. If I make one wrong move, I could be out of this game before I even begin. Jess leaned closer, a spark of determination igniting in her eyes. Then let us think this through together. What do you really want to achieve? The question looped in Emily's mind, a vital prompt to distill her ambitions into something actionable. I want to steer conversations about accountability, real conversations that force people to confront uncomfortable truths. What's our first step? Jess asked, curiosity radiating from her. A surge of conviction rushed through Emily, kindling a robust plan. We organize a panel discussion, bring together experts, activists, and those impacted directly. Let them share their experiences. If we can harness their stories, we can raise awareness. A glimmer of excitement flickered in Jess's expression. And you can moderate. You're already a trusted voice after that speech. Could lend credibility. Emily nodded, the idea taking root. Yes, but it can't just be about me being in the spotlight again. It needs to be a diverse journey. Every voice matters. As the sparks of brainstorming lit up the table, an unsettling thought crept into her consciousness. The more visible she became in this arena, the greater the risk. If Ted sensed any threat to his carefully cultivated narrative, she could easily become a target. The thought prickled her resolve with anxiety, but it also infused her with a fierce determination. Emily, Jess's voice brought her back. You're going to need support for this. Not just me, but from others who care. Those who understand the stakes. But Emily also understood the potential pushback she could face, not just from Ted, but from others who benefited from the status quo. She had seen firsthand how dissenters were marginalized. What if we reached out to people in Ted's circle? Emily's voice faltered at the prospect, aware of how precarious that could be. Risky, Jess replied. pursing her lips in contemplation. But it could also sway more minds. If they can see through the facade, perhaps we can create a faction of awareness. Emily pondered the prospects ahead. Challenges loomed ahead like darkened clouds, but beneath her uncertainty lay a deep reservoir of strength. As they sketched out ideas for panels and potential speakers, a thrill welled within her, a whisper of growth, conviction, and purpose. Once they had fleshed out the outlines of their plan, Emily felt the pulse of possibility. Everything was aligning. Her friendship with Jess, shared ambitions, and the pressing need for accountability. It was exhilarating. Okay, then we start making calls tomorrow, Emily declared, her resolve hardening. However, unease flickered at the edges of her excitement. Just as she began to relish the momentum, the shadows that Ted cast loomed larger, and she instinctively sensed a looming threat ready to dismantle her intentions. Would he retaliate publicly? Dismiss her efforts as irrelevant? The thought spiraled through Emily's mind, planting seeds of doubt and determination in equal measure. The stakes were high, and the consequences could ripple far beyond her individual journey. What if this well-meaning initiative turned into a battleground, where her professional aspirations met harsh reality? As the minutes rolled by, she exchanged glances with Jess, both poised on the brink of action. But uneasiness tugged gently at the edge of Emily's mind. What if the very world she wished to challenge was ready to counter her at every turn? The next morning, when they began to reach out, a new message buzzed on Emily's phone, an invite from Ted to discuss collaboration over coffee. Was this an olive branch or a trap? One thing was certain. The battle lines had been drawn, and how Emily navigated the turbulent waters ahead would define not only her ambitions, but who she truly was in the face of power. Would she dare to engage in a dance of diplomacy, or would she unmask the truth hidden beneath that demonstrated grace? All she knew was that the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and now the reality of her choices pressed heavily upon her shoulders, demanding a response. Emily sat at her kitchen table, staring at the message that replayed in her mind like a relentless echo. An invitation from Ted felt like a minefield, each step laden with the threat of hidden dangers. He was offering coffee, but what did he really want? It was a calculated move, away to draw her into a web of compliance, or to trap her into revealing her intentions. The stakes couldn't be higher. She pushed her half-empty cup away as uncertainty clouded her thoughts. Jess, just adjusting her chair, picked up on Emily's tension. You're not seriously considering it, are you? Her voice was a mixture of disbelief and concern. I have to think strategically, Emily replied, her voice steadier than she felt. It was a risk, but ignoring Ted's invitation would only solidify the boundary, making her seem confrontational instead of cooperative. If I'm going to challenge his influence, I need to understand his game. Jess's brow furrowed. Just remember, going in there without a plan can give him the upper hand. You can't let him manipulate this. Emily drew in a deep breath, aligning her resolve. I won tea. This is part of the chess match, and I can't afford to be a pawn. That evening, as she prepared for the meeting, Emily turned her attention inward. What was it about Ted that made him so unerringly persuasive? The answer lay not just in his wealth, but in his ability to weave a narrative that shielded him from scrutiny. The very same talent she needed to turn the tide in her favor. The realization sparked a deeper understanding of her own capabilities. Perhaps she could be more than just the challenger. She could be a strategist. On the day of the coffee meeting, nerves twisted in her stomach as she approached the high-rise Ted had chosen. The plush surroundings felt alien, a realm of lavishness that dripped from the ceilings and enshrined him in a halo of privilege. Stepping inside, she reminded herself of her mission. She was armed not just with passion but with knowledge and intent. These would be her tools to navigate a potentially treacherous conversation. When Ted appeared, his confident stride made her heart race. He offered a disarming smile, but recognition flickered in his eyes. He knew the stakes, and so did she. Emily, I'm glad you could make it. I thought we might discuss some collaborative efforts. She returned his smile, but with a firm resolve behind it. Of course. I'm curious about your vision for the future, and how it aligns with community interests. Ted leaned back, raising a brow in curiosity, or was it a challenge? It's all about uplifting others, I assent to it? That's what it will take to really make a difference. His words danced like smoke, beautiful yet elusive. Emily suppressed her instinct to challenge him outright. Instead, she nodded, taking in his rhetoric. Uplifting others implies transparent dialogue and accountability. Would you agree? The shift in his demeanor was subtle, but she noticed it the way he leaned a little less forward. Accountability in this space can be nuanced. One man's accountability is another man's pestering. Emily took note of that. There was the distinction she needed to exploit. She could see how his charm blurred truths. Nuances can oftentimes conceal realities that need to be addressed, she stated, daring to push. There are many voices that strive for authenticity against the backdrop of well-crafted narratives. For the first time, a shadow of uncertainty flashed across Ted's face. He regarded her with a renewed interest, perhaps weighing the risk she posed. And you think your approach might be effective? That depends, she replied, heart racing as she metaphorically laid her cards on the table. On how willing you are to engage honestly with those stories rather than overriding them. The expression on his face became inscrutable, a conflicted interplay of assessment and intrigue. She had pierced through the haze of his charm, but the danger of where this interaction might lead loomed larger. Emily sensed the challenge rising, a game of influence unfolding. As their conversation continued, she felt emboldened, not by the knowledge that she might persuade him, but by understanding she could assert her voice without diminishing her own truth. This meeting, whether a strategic advance or a graceful retreat, marked a significant step toward reclaiming authority, not only for herself but for those whose stories demanded to be heard. The coffee grew cold between them as Emily wondered if this was merely the beginning of a deeper confrontation. What would it take to fully unmask the puppeteer behind the curtain? Yet, even as she stood on the brink of opportunity, she recalled the delicate balance between intention and outcome. How long could she maintain this facade without revealing her growing apprehension? The conversation continued, but in the back of her mind, a new realization emerged. Stepping further into Ted's world might illuminate not just his moves, but her weaknesses as well. Would she be able to navigate this high-stakes game with her convictions intact? Or would she find herself ensnared in a web she had underestimated? The weight of the moment bore down on her, a reminder that every action bore consequences. And just as clarity began to materialize, an unexpected notification flashed on her phone, shivering her thoughts back to the present. A notification of Ted's upcoming gala, an apex of influence that could either reinforce her position or swallow her whole. One choice stood ahead, and it would set the stage for everything to come. Join the gatherers or stand against the tide. Either way, the next move was hers. The gala was but a few days away, yet the weight of the decision pressed heavily on Emily's chest. She sat in her living room, a half-packed bag at her feet, wrestling with the timing and implications of attending. The anticipation of the event stirred a mix of excitement and trepidation, a potential battleground where ambitions and attitudes collided. As she prepared her attire, each garment felt symbolic. They were not merely clothes but armor. Would the right outfit empower her against Ted's relentless veneer of charm, or would it only serve to accentuate the disparity between them? She opted for a deep navy dress, structured yet elegant, a reflection of her intention to blend authority with grace. Standing before the mirror, Emily practiced her posture and expressions while envisioning the scenarios that might unfold. How would she navigate the labyrinth of potential conversations? More importantly, how would she confront Ted when the moment arose? She didn't just want to show up to the gala as another guest, she needed to make a statement, both personally and professionally. But self-doubt gnawed at her resolve. What if Ted's charm and influence overpowered her? She couldn't ignore the specter of confrontation that lurked at the edges of her consciousness. She had glimpsed a part of Ted's world but felt as if she was still on the outside, peering into a realm where power dynamics played like a complex game. The day of the gala dawned bright, yet Emily's heart fluttered with unease as she arrived at the venue, a luxurious banquet hall dressed in opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung regally, casting softer light on the multitude of guests mingling in their best attire. The air was alive with conversations that came together and unraveled like the intricate patterns of the centerpiece flowers, beautiful, but also fleeting. She took a moment at the entrance, inhaling deeply to solidify her intentions. This was her chance to assert herself within the narrative Ted had spun. Emily stepped inside and felt the atmosphere shift slightly. She was an island in a sea of unfocused power. Everywhere she looked, influencers and industry leaders were gathered, exchanging flattery and alliances as if they were currency. As she navigated through the well-dressed throngs, Emily caught sight of Ted across the room, holding court among a group of admirers. His charisma was palpable, and she could see why people gravitated toward him. He encapsulated the confidence that came from privilege. But the very qualities that attracted others unnerved Emily. Was he aware of the strings he pulled to orchestrate his surroundings, and could she possibly disrupt his rhythm? In a calculated move, she approached his enclave, gripping her purse tightly. The buzz of idle chatter subsided, and for a fleeting moment, she had the stage to herself. "Ted," she said, her voice steady though her heart raced. "I must say, your invitation to the gala has certainly brought a vibrant energy to our community." He turned, a welcoming smile plastered on his face. "Emily, so glad you could join us. Would you like to join the conversation? We were just discussing the next steps for community initiatives." Actually, she interjected, forcing herself to lean in. "I believe it's essential we discuss some aspects of accountability in these initiatives. The voices of the community deserve to be part of the decision-making process, not just afterthoughts." Silence enveloped them for a heartbeat. A flicker of disappointment crossed Ted's features before he masked it with a practiced smile. "Accountability can be a slippery slope, don't you think? I might argue that some leaders know best how to steer change. Steering change without local input as IT guidance. It's dictation," she countered, her tone firmer than it had ever been. "If you want your initiatives to have a real impact, you need to be willing to listen and be held accountable." As the conversation unfolded, Emily felt their dynamic shift. She wasn't merely contesting Ted's ideals, but carving a space for her own. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Every remark felt like a move in the ongoing chess match, nudging the pieces closer to the center of the board. Before she could catch her breath, whispers began to ripple through the surrounding crowd, eyes darting between them like the flickering candlelight. Was it intrigue, contempt, or a mixture of both that she sensed? Did she have what it took to stand her ground against the tide of reputations and whispers? The underlying stakes of her strategizing loomed larger, as she realized that this night could either solidify her position as a contender or expose her insecurities. It was one thing to wield her voice in a singular moment. It was another entirely to navigate the fallout of this revelation amidst the delicate alliances forming around her. Just then, a laugh erupted from the group nearby, shrouded in condescension. One socialite, impeccably dressed, turned her gaze toward Emily, her smugness palpable in the air. "And tell me, my dear, did you receive a complimentary dress for the occasion? Or did you invest a bit more into your wardrobe?" The jab landed like a blow, and Emily's composure wavered, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. This was it, the ultimate test. Would she let the artifice of others define her worth, or would she rise to the challenge of proclaiming her value, unencumbered by the mockery of privileged voices? Glancing back at Ted, whose smirk hinted at a hidden smirk of amusement, a rush of adrenaline surged through her. She could see where this was headed, and it was time to take the next step deeper into the game. There lay before her not only a confrontation with Ted, but a potential clash with the broader expectations that swirled among the elite. She could either fold under pressure or leverage the moment as a stepping stone. But which choice would weave her story into something greater? As she stood there, poised on the precipice of self-revelation, the question loomed larger than before: could she become the architect of her own narrative, or would she allow others to dictate her fate? The lights glimmered around her, drawing her deeper into the fray. The moment of truth loomed, and Emily had to decide. Rise above or retreat behind the veil of compliance. The road ahead held uncertainties tinged with both risk and promise. Choices had to be made that would define her journey beyond this night and into the future. Would she face the shadows lurking in the corners of opulence, or would she step out of the dark, ready to embrace the sacrifices needed for her vision? Emily felt the heat of the socialite's words hang in the air, mingling with the sharpness of her own resolve. The laughter that followed was like a trigger, igniting a fierce determination within her. She couldn't let Ted or anyone else undermine the journey she had embarked upon. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her spine, her voice steadying as she spoke. "This dress was a choice, just like the values I bring into this conversation. While some prioritize appearances, I prioritize substance and impact. What matters is not just how I present myself, but the commitment I carry to bring real change to my community." And that is something you can't buy. The crowd around her fell into a stunned silence. She felt the weight of gazes shifting, some in admiration, others in disdain. Ted's smirk faltered, and for a fleeting moment, she could see the moment of reckoning reflected on his face. "You're brave, Emily," he said. A questionable tone laced into his voice. "But you might soon learn that playing in the big leagues requires more than just confidence." "Perhaps, but one thing I've learned in my career is that courage is essential. It's the engine that propels true ambition," Emily replied, her conviction radiating with newfound clarity. The laughter that had shrouded her moments prior transformed into applause from a handful of guests who had gathered nearby. The murmurs traversed the room, questions swirling. Was this nurse challenging the status quo? It was not about the dress. It was about the message she had delivered, about the lives she had touched through her decisions. As she locked eyes with Jess across the room where she stood, wide-eyed but supportive, their connection anchored her with strength. The night continued, but she remained resolute. Ted's presence felt less like a threat now, and more like an opportunity. They exchanged barbs back and forth, neither giving ground. Emily proved to be not just resilient but also intelligent, anticipating his tactics and reframing the narrative. With every challenge, she felt herself transform further, inching a step closer to the leader she aspired to be, to someone who could blend compassion with the tenacity needed to create waves of change. For the first time in a long while, she embraced the complexity of her role. Ambition didn't need to mean abandoning her roots, but rather intertwining them with her desires for improvement in the community she cherished. Days after the gala, Emily received an unexpected message from a renowned healthcare journalist. Inspired by her narrative of empowerment and cautious about Ted's influence, they proposed an interview covering her journey, her donation, and vision for the future. This was what success looked like: her story being recognized, her voice being amplified beyond the walls of the gala. In that moment, a profound realization settled within her. She had cultivated a bridge between her past and future, a path that resonated with authenticity and purpose. Looking back at where she started, Emily could appreciate the evolution from uncertainty to a place of solid confidence. She was expressing her unique authority as a voice for those too often ignored. As she shared her experiences, reactions to the interview rippled through social media and community forums. Support poured in from unexpected sources, reinforcing her efforts. Recognized not merely for her donation, but for being the catalyst of change, she felt a gratifying connection to the lives she had resolved to uplift. Months later, as her foundation took root and began to weave itself into the fabric of healthcare accessibility efforts, Emily stood on the threshold of a new era, both personally and professionally. She had organized town hall meetings where diverse voices could express their truths and needs, aligning public sentiment towards significantly overdue reforms. One afternoon, a roundtable discussion featured patients advocating for their rights, each story poised to shift the conversation. It was a testament that things were evolving. She had become a linchpin in bridging disparate narratives. It felt fulfilling to finally see the dreams that had once seemed distant materializing into reality. Amidst it all, her relationship with Jess remained intact, growing into a partnership that celebrated both their journeys without dismissing their past. Together, they became advocates and allies, reshaping the image of activism where clarity and authenticity reigned. Emily's journey had culminated into something incredible. She had embraced her identity as a unifying force, an essential voice for change. At last, she stood not just as a nurse or a philanthropist, but as a confident influence in her community. She had proven herself not only to Ted but to the self-doubt that once gripped her. With every step towards accountability and transparency, Emily demonstrated how personal growth and professional success could coalesce into a transformative movement. This was her moment of triumph. Steady in her convictions, bound by compassion, she had forged a legacy that would inspire others to do the same. And as she looked to the future, she knew that the road ahead held further trials, but she was ready, advanced by personal achievement, armed with a solid sense of self, and committed to leave a profound mark on the world. Now is the time for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss out on the next exclusive emotional stories that can transform your life. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and ensure these motivational journeys reach more hearts and minds. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Emily's incredible journey. Your insights matter. And don't wait even one more second. Share this uplifting video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this personal triumph and become part of a transformative storytelling community. Make your voice count.